And thank you for joining us for today's Fiber Broadband Association webinar. My name is David Norris. I'm the webinar producer here at FBA. Thank you very much for taking time to join. We appreciate it. Today's webinar is Fast ROI in Fiber, how to turn Bead builds into bankable growth. And this is being brought to us today by CSG. So we'll have a panel discussion here in just a moment. But before we jump in, I just want to take care of a couple quick housekeeping items. First of all, we want to keep this interactive. So please do ask your questions. You are in listen-only mode today, but you can ask questions by typing them into the Ask a Question tool, which is located in the lower left-hand side of your screen. Also, I want to draw your attention to several resources that we have in the resources section, which is in the upper right-hand side of your screen. So be sure to check those out. And links to those resources will also be included in a follow-up email following the end of the webinar today. We also have a couple of poll questions that will be coming in today. So if you wish to respond to those poll questions, you can select your answer directly from the slide window where they appear, which is on the left-hand side of your screen today. And with that, let's jump right in. So again, we have a couple of panelists from CSG today, and we're talking about fast ROI in fiber. And let's just have a look at our panelists here. We've got Rick Fernandez, who is the Executive Director for CSG Product Management. And we have Jeff Harbinson, who is the Director for CSG Business Development. So welcome, gentlemen. Appreciate you taking time for this and putting everything together here. And with that, I'll hand things over to Rick just to get us started here. So Rick, you want to take things away?
Yeah, thanks, David. Appreciate the time, and thank you, everyone, for joining the webinar here today. Just by way of background, I've been with CSG for about 20 plus years, within the industry for about 30. So mainly on the product management side for strategy and delivery of BSS systems across a number of different industries. Obviously, we're talking about fiber broadband here today. And as David mentioned, I'm being joined by my colleague, Jeff Harbinson. Jeff, do you want to do a quick introduction for yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Rick, and thanks everyone for joining. David, I appreciate the setup as well. But Jeff Harbinson, I've been in the business over 20 years as well, half of my career in OSS, BSS, and technology and semiconductors. So really excited to have this conversation today. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm glad to be here with you. So yeah, we wanted to spend some time as David kicked us off talking about Bead and what it means for ROI growth for the industry and for markets, and where you're getting into the mix here. And really what it comes down to is we all know that Bead, from a funding and a grant perspective, is providing a lot of revenue or injection of capital into the market. $42.5 billion is a lot of investment, and it's a massive opportunity for operators. It's also brings with it a lot of responsibility to do that. So if you think about it, getting the funding is a start. Getting that grant money as a way to get in is a start. But what happens with that after you get the grant and that funding is really where things start to really happen. So how do you monetize, and how do you support, and how do you grow with that? And that's what we're going to talk a little bit here today. So as you go through that, question then comes into, as you're building brand, as you're building your presence within given markets, do you have staying power to win and grow that market share? So as you go through that, things to think about is it a near-term survival mode, which I don't think anybody is thinking about that. It's more of a thriving type of an approach. And how do you turn that into a long-term leadership within the market? So what you do today can affect where you are tomorrow. So how you make certain decisions and decide how you're going to place those bets, so to speak, which we'll talk about here today. Those choices and those decisions can really impact how you scale going forward. So Jeff, what is your perspective a little bit on this as you think about tech stack? You think about, obviously, customer experience is a big part of this. How do you see that maybe fitting into making the choices around grant, and then where you go from there?
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, look, Bead, the Bead funding is approving everyone's business case. So go get that process done, right? That's like getting free opportunity to build out your infrastructure. What we're seeing in the marketplace too is it's mostly around a network build, but the infrastructure around software should be equally important. You're going to be competing against thousands of new fiber codes, thousands. That's an amazing number of growth that's happened in the past few years. Just in 2025 alone, just some facts for you, right? 50% of households will have fiber. The growth is amazing. In the next 5 years, 30% of the market will be fiber. That's the market share for fiber. So the opportunity is absolutely fantastic. The CAGR growth is double digits over the next 4 or 5 years. So the time is now. That BEAD money is approving that business case to go get quality infrastructure, right? And to think about not just day one, but what's your day two going to look like, right? You need to provide fantastic efficiencies, right? In order to scale, grab those customers, go get that market share, get that automation moving. You need to enable that superior customer service around your products and services. That's going to be your biggest differentiator to compete with those thousands of other fiber codes out there in your market. You need to be able to scale. You need to be able to pivot with market demand and competitive threats that you see in your marketplace as well. And you need to deliver operational excellence behind the scenes, right? You're going to have a lot of manual things, duct tape. We're just getting the company going. But as volume starts to happen, customers start to come on board, you're going to have to automate those processes. We're seeing a lot of challenges in that. And I think finding that quality infrastructure on day one is super important.
Yeah, I think it's a great point you're bringing up with this, Jeff. And you think through all of those decisions that you're talking through, all of the elements that go into this, everything from network to back office to what's the customer experience look like. So with that, David, I think we have a poll question we wanted to provide here, which is, were you as a business or as an operator looking to focus those BEAD funds? And we provided a number of options, from network deployment to demand generation or aggregation to installation, et cetera. So we'd like to take a couple, maybe a minute or two here, let the participants respond to that, and then we'll have a bit of a discussion on what you're saying.
Yep, absolutely. And again, just to repeat that question, because I see that the font color has made it somewhat invisible on your screen. It's, how are you planning to focus the use of BEAD funds? So go ahead and select your answers, and we've got some results coming in now. We'll give it another 10 seconds or so here. So again, the question, which is hard to read on your screen, is how are you planning to focus the use of BEAD funds? All right, let's have a look at the results.
Yeah, very, very telling to see what we're seeing here. So network deployment coming in at the top, and then you have field service and installation as next. So Jeff, it's interesting that, that's surprising that that's the case. If you think about what you're really facing as you get into market, is really building up from an infrastructure point of view, getting into market, getting through homes passed and fiber to the home type of things, and then the installation is a big part. Interesting though, as we're looking at this, that things like demand generation and maybe sales didn't register. What are your thoughts on what you're seeing here in terms of the results?
Yeah, Rick, it's great to see this. Like, this is no surprise to what we're seeing in the market, right? In the segment, you need to get the network stood up. You need to get the infrastructure ready to go to provide the products and services. That's a no-brainer, right? But as you think about what's going to happen right after that, right? We need customers. We need revenue. We need happy customers. We need customers that want to stay with us. And so all those other points are really areas that should have equal focus as you think about what happens once the network is up and running. You need revenue, you need customers. We're seeing a lot of problems in the marketplace immediately once the network looks like it's planned out. We it's going, we have a plan, we know when it's going to be deployed, but then we quickly see problems when it comes to our manual processes and how we're going to onboard customers. We see missing capability, right, of having to serve certain types of customers, whether that's an end subscriber at a household, or maybe it's a lot of customers in a multi-dwelling unit. How do we handle that from a back office software perspective? Visibility into my infrastructure, right? As we get going here, how am I going to see what's going on so that I can continue to make informed, insightful decisions? And scale, I've got a team now, we're running hard, but when I start to see volume, do I need to hire more people, or can my infrastructure handle that volume, right? And then as I move and I get into my markets and I work with the communities that I'm working in and competing in, how do I meet that market demand? How do I pivot my organization quickly to offer what my customers want in the marketplace? So these are things that need to have that equal attention. Not surprised to see where we're at on this, but I think this is a good discussion to have today. The infrastructure needs to be a quick follow-on or equal footing here when it comes to spending this BEAD money on this infrastructure.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, Jeff, is where we're going to spend the second part of our time here in terms of our content is really around that ROI. So customer experience coming in at 11%, that's a good indicator as to where I think from an operations point of view, you're thinking about where you need to get to. So with that, if we go to the next slide here, David, we want to talk about what ROI actually means and what it could turn into as far as where you have to get to beyond just the initial investments here. So ROI is not just necessarily a monetary element. It's how fast you get to market, which is a good indicator as to where the poll question came in as to where that focus is. But it's also a few other things. We see that in some cases, in a lot of cases, that customers are putting the level of customer experience and customer satisfaction at the same level as the actual service itself. So you could have the best delivery from a network point of view, but if your customer experience suffers, that's a KPI where you could run into some serious problems from an adoption point of view. One bad customer experience can really cause issues. The other item that needs to be thought through here is the actual revenue that you're generating. So there's a big investment in terms of homes passed costs from a rural to an urban perspective. The amount of the costs to go through and actually bring fiber to a home is going to vary greatly, which means the ARPU related to that is also going to be top of mind. So you have to factor all those elements in. And as you're making those decisions, as you'll see here, as we're indicating here, that speed without strategy can cause quite a bit of an issue coming down the road. So when we talk about technical debt, we really think about the systems that you're bringing into play initially. So are you bespoking a number of different technical decisions? If it's back office, if it's network infrastructure, how you manage NOC integrations, that can then turn into, if it's a case of getting network capability to your customers, but the service is not supported in terms of customer experience, that's going to drive things like subscriber churn. Churn is going to be a huge challenge here in the market. We'll talk about this a little bit further a little later. But then from there, as you're going through that, if you get to a point of coming in market at maybe a starting point from a greenfield point of view, once you get to that next growth step, if it's a case where you have to re-platform, that's a big challenge as well. So how you're thinking through migration strategies, how you're thinking about scaling, that all has to be factored into this. And as we go through this, we were thinking about this not just from maybe a 12-month perspective, but 3 to 5 years out. So Jeff, what are your thoughts about those elements and how we're talking to our customers about this as a challenge?
Yeah, all good points, Rick. You think about all that infrastructure you just laid out. What type of vendors are out there to support all those boxes, right? And in an integrated fashion, right? Do you go best of breed? Do you go best of suite, right? I think for what we're talking about here, a best of suite makes a lot of sense for fast deployments with quality integration. So it makes me think about that the dynamic triangle between fast, cheap, and good, right? Good is a little more expensive, takes a little more time, right? Fast is the quality is not good, right? Capability potentially is not there. And that tends to go with cheap as well. You can do 2 of those 3, but doing all 3 is very difficult to do, right? You think about how are we going to go to market? How are we going to capture that growth? You need to be agile and scalable right out of the gate to get moving here. And I think the niche here really is a frictionless customer experience. When you think about the hundreds, tens of hundreds, and thousands of cable codes out there, how are you going to stand out? What's the winning formula here? And I think the winning formula is finding that niche, finding that customer experience that gets them to come to you and stay with you. And then what about the future, right? When you think about the future, we've got our plan day 1, but I mentioned day 2 earlier. What about the next generation of Wi-Fi? What about, interacting and having to work with 5G? What about IoT? What about commercial and business models, right, outside of consumer? Where do you want to be 4 or 5 years down? Those are good markets to support and be a part of, and is your infrastructure set up to do that? So fast, get to market, but there's a lot of rework and redo down the road once you get going here.
Yep. And to add to all that, Jeff, I know we're talking about Bead in particular here. From a grading perspective, that obviously brings in some additional elements to it in terms of requirements or expectations around federal grants and state level disbursements of that. So that's another element to keep in mind if it's about equity, if it's about delivery to rural markets in terms of access. Those things have to also be factored in. So on top of the things that we're talking about here, it's how do those additional requirements factor into that as well, and that could add risk to the business case as well. So, David, if we can go to the next poll question here, which is about what is the biggest challenge that you see from a business perspective after you get a customer connected? So once you have a subscriber that's signed up, what do you see as the next level of challenge from that initial demand aggregation? Give this a bit.
Yep, that is up and running. And again, it's what's your biggest challenge after a customer is connected? So we've got some responses coming in here. Let's go ahead and give it another 10 to 15 seconds or so. All right, let's go ahead and I think we've got a good number of responses here. Let's go ahead and have a look at the results.
Okay. All right, pretty evenly distributed here. So getting access to services, shortening the order to cash cycle, and upsell and retain, keeping engaged after install. A lot of this does I think point to customer experience and that other overall customer view. Things like we mentioned, customer experience is as important as the actual service itself. So Jeff, what are your thoughts on what you're seeing here?
Yeah, so this is fantastic. This actually kind of rolls into the point we're trying to make here. Look at this, all equal weighting a little bit here on the challenges that are happening next, right? And the infrastructure that's going to be needed to support this. There's a little different type of capability to support each of these swim lanes here of capability. And does your infrastructure address this, right? These are things that we need to think about as we go forward. They're all equally important. And I'm surprised that we got that, but pleasantly surprised that we're seeing that, right? That really puts a stress on, making the right decisions on how to support this from the back end.
It's interesting to that point when you see about order to cash cycle, and then visibility on post installation behavior. Those two, I think, just talk about really how quickly do you monetize, and then how do you go about retaining. So those are huge, I think, elements to think through. Questions on billing is interesting because I think the market itself is kind of at an inflection point here, where in a lot of cases the expectation is that this could be a subscription-based model where I'm paying through a credit card to get set up. We also are running into cases where as you branch out, if it's a post-paid model, if you're offering streaming services or additional lines of business, in addition to the fiber offering or the broadband offering, is something to keep in mind here. So it's a good mix across all of these areas. And going back to the first poll question, when you see that installation and really getting into market is important, this is that next thought around what does it mean to take that next step forward kind of leads into, I think, our next slide here. If you want to go to that next slide here, David.
Yeah, and I think, look, Greg, I think I'll add too, look, that billing question is sort of the next thing, right? You can see that everyone's focused on the front end of this process, right? Once everything's up and running, then you start to see the customers, exploring and asking questions. So it makes a lot of sense what we see in the poll.
Right. So as we're thinking through this, and as you're going through this day to day, it really comes down to a case where, the pressure that you're facing it's brutal. You're in cases, we've heard scenarios where, depending on where you are geographically, you may be across several different states in the U.S. If you're going through a rural build out, you may have 2 or 3 operators or competitors within a specific location. And if you're spread across a wider geography, you're talking about dozens, if not hundreds of competitors that you're now grappling with. And that goes both ways. You're seeing it and they're seeing it as well. With that, you're also going to be facing, in a lot of cases, what that payback looks like from either a private equity or a Bead-driven type of investment here, 2 to 4 year payback. So how quickly does that turn into a result? If it's ROI on ARPU, if it's subscriber growth, if it's grabbing market share, being positioned where you can grow over time, those challenges are there, and it's really there a case where do you move fast and make sure you're not locked in with technical debt. So being able to build that awareness, which that last poll question is a good indicator that's where the next thought is going, is where do you build towards that, and then be able to scale and be agile and responsive to your customers. So all of those elements kind of fitting into this, Jeff, what are your thoughts on how those all fit together as that next step, if you think 2 years, 3 years, 4 years out?
Yeah, look, I think, and for most people on this call, realize that the opportunities now over the next 3 to 5 years, and what's your business plan over the next 3 to 5 years. The reality is this: 50% of you will either be out of business or acquired by, someone else, or be part of that acquiring. Right? That's the market we're in. So back to growth and customers, revenue, super important. That's what's going to make your company attractive, and having the infrastructure to execute on that is absolutely critical. We're going to see a lot of M&A. We've seen a lot of big moves in the last 12 months with Verizon and T-Mobile, AT&T, some of the big ones. But certainly in the P&E segment, we're seeing a lot of movement as well there, and that's going to continue over the next few years. So where do you want to position your company? Exit strategy, or we want to be one of those companies that wants to be that acquire and brand, 5+ years out. So those are the things that need to happen there. The market is right? 65% of internet customers want fiber, right? And so now's the time to find that niche, find that customer experience angle, and make yourself a differentiator in the marketplace.
And just to add to that, it's a case where, as these decisions are being made, there's technical decisions being made across the entire stack. So who are you working with? Who are you teaming up with? And there's also, I think, a notion, if you're thinking about it one way, is, are you getting yourself into a vendor lock situation? If you go down a path, are you locked in with a vendor for a period of time? And is it that type of a situation? Or within the way that we think about it within CSG, is it a business partnership? And one of the things that we really hang our hat on, so to speak, is we look at this where CSG is a business partner. We are vested in making sure our customers are successful. That's people, that's process, that's product. And it's not just necessarily a billing play or a network operations play. It's all the things that are there to help grow over time. We've talked about retention. We've talked about subscriber growth. All those elements coming in to play who are your partners in this? Are they partners or are they vendor relationships? And are they going to help you grow fast and build for the long term as you grow through that? And organic growth is certainly there. I think that's a big driver, but also that acquisition angle that you just spoke about is important here. So how are you positioned to handle acquisitions, and how do you go through that from a migration point of view is also things that we very much work with our customers to think about a little bit more. So with that being the case, we want to wrap up here really quickly if we can, if you want to go to the last follow-up slide, and then we'll do some discussion here, David. Think through this, you can scan the QR code. CSG, again, has been in this market for a number of years from a broadband point of view. We have a number of things that we're providing to market here, including some information around the way that we're looking at the fiber industry. We'd love to have some conversations with you around that. We know that this is a very competitive, fast-moving market. Fiber's, on par with AI as far as the changes that are happening in market here. So your ability to be agile with that and also position yourself for growth is really where we would love to talk with you more. So with that, David, I'll turn it back over to you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both for the overview here. That definitely sets us up well. So just to kick things off, obviously Bead is fueling growth, and you've made it clear that you're focusing on a long-term leadership strategy rather than just short-term survival is a good bet. But what investments will truly position operators to scale and compete 5 years from now?
Jeff, did you want to talk to that first?
Well, it might be threefold. So I'm going to advocate the third one as the strongest, but I know the challenge of targeting where to compete is a challenge, and that Bead Money is assisting with those markets. Where am I going to be most successful as a fiber co? What does that plan look like? Building out a realistic model, a cost model, right? How am I going to get to market? My infrastructure cost to support that market, what does that look like? I know that's a second option to think about, consider. And then the third one, which Rick and I here are advocating, just as important as a network build out, is the software infrastructure build out as well. Having the right systems behind the scenes to execute on day one and support your day two, super critical.
Yeah, David, to add to that, we know it's a hyper local market. Being in market and being very much in the community is a big driver, which leads me to say it's demand aggregation is top of mind. So once you're making that initial investment on the infrastructure side, being able to identify and then court those subscribers becomes our next step. And then what we are absolutely hyper focused on here is monetization. So that short order to cash cycle is huge. So think about it from a point of view of, we hear a lot about that buyer's remorse to a certain degree, where I might sign up with a provider. Maybe I have someone visit my doorstep and I say, hey, I'm going to sign up. Before the installation is complete, I may call back and say, no, I don't want the service. So your ability to get installed quickly at the premise, get the services up and running, and actually get payment started, getting that hook in is super important. So we really very much focus on that order to cash cycle and how do you monetize that quickly and actually turn prospects and paying customers as quickly as you can. David, I'm not hearing you.
Thank you very much. I had a dog making noise behind me, so appreciate that. But going along those that same line here. So, with the BEAD funding, the question is, when it comes to systems and infrastructure, how do you decide if now's the time to make transformational changes versus waiting? And are there risks associated with delaying, and what are the benefits of actually making those big investments now?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, this may be a little bit too direct, but it's almost like a pay now versus pay later kind of a scenario here, David. So we know that the money is there. It can be tight. There can be also some regulatory requirements around it. So the decisions that you make today could get you through the first initial wave of getting into market. So that's something to certainly think about. But how do you look at it, and how does it position you for the longer term? So we look at it as a total cost of ownership play. as you're making these decisions. So if you get in and put a few systems together to get to a point where things are good enough, that can certainly get you through that initial launch point and ramp up. When it comes down to how do you focus on growing the business, we look at it and say, make the decisions and the investments early, especially around areas around acquisition, around billing, around monetization. So you're not worried about being able to adapt to the market. And that may be entering into a new geography. It could also be adapting to the market in terms of offerings and how quickly can you add additional lines of business. Having those systems in place now, though maybe a little bit more expensive, as Jeff was talking about, may take a little bit more time to set up, but getting those decisions in place now and know that you're in a best of suite type of a scenario is going to allow you to run faster down the road. So it's a bit of a trade-off for sure, but how do you take the investments you're making on the network side and be positioned to grow fast? Those are the things I think that a lot of companies are going to be grappling with. And also the last thing I'll say here is think about migration. And it's not just how you would migrate subscribers onto your platform, but it could be acquisitions that happen down the road. How are you positioned to bring additional markets on? Or if you are acquiring, what does that look like? If you have an exit strategy down the line, are you positioned to really make that type of an acquisition or migration as effective as possible? Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, look, I go back to maybe the earlier slide we talked about with speed. I might reframe it and say, look, it's urgency, right? There's urgency in everything we do. And when I'm looking at these models, quality is the way to go. How many times, personal life, if you walk back and said, I should have done that. I should have done that at the start. This should be no different. The cost models for a little bit better in SaaS and deployment are really right there. It's worth the additional evaluation, the understanding of what it looks like to deploy right away, give yourself some quick wins, and then tell me what the ramp up and the next thing in the future looks like as we build a business. So it's worth building the quality in day one and not getting into the rework and time. As you compete and your business gets going, now you're dealing with rework and rebuild while you're trying to get customers and compete in this space. That's going to be a lot harder than doing it day one when you've got this infrastructure start going now.
Great. And so going along those same lines of that kind of forward-looking strategy, how do field service onboarding and customer engagement shape loyalty and lifetime value? And what role do strong business partnerships play in sustaining this growth as you look forward?
Yeah, sure. Field service management, talk about a front line to your business. It's the folks that are tip of the spear, so to speak. So when you're doing installation and actually having the ability to not only get elements installed, but we know that it's getting closer and closer and closer to the customer. So it's not just, hey, is my network connected? Do I have connectivity? It's, hey, my smart TV's not working, or the elements in the home are not connected. So that's part of that experience. That is again, frontline to the brand. So if it's a case where you are able to get the installation done, but then something happens once you leave, those things are enough to make a customer want to move away and go somewhere else very quickly. It's a very competitive market. So when we stress CX, we stress the ability to deliver service. That's all, again, part and parcel to what you're building. It's not just the network investment. It's the actual build into the brand. So hyper local, again, being able to say that you are able to deliver, and the folks that are on the front line, so to speak, represent your values and they represent who you are as a company are huge. And once you break trust and once you break loyalty, it's very hard to get that back. It's almost like you have one shot at it, and once that's done, it can snowball and become a bigger problem. So, Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, related to field service management, that's a front end application that your end customers have exposure to, right? And the service needs to be outstanding. I want my service turned up, I want it working, and I want it done in a timely manner that we scheduled on. So, if you can just get that done in a low bar, that's what you got to meet. Now, put some flexibility into that. Customers change their mind, they change times. Your techs are doing different jobs. One's faster, one's slower. How do I schedule all that in real time and coordinate that with the back end on products and services and how we launch? There's a lot of complexity in that. And finding a partner that knows how to do that well in an automated fashion, I think you're going to have a lot of success with. Partners that give you good insights, smart insights. As an executive, I can make a decision quickly off of that, and offer me thought leadership are going to be the best partnerships in the marketplace.
Yeah. And then, David, I just add one more thing to that, and that's this notion of customer lifecycle. When you think about customer journeys and those types of things, it's a case where how many times you touch a customer through emails or text messages and those follow-ups, if there's a service problem, how you're communicating. Those are other elements that are going to be there, and they're going to be fast followers to the initial launch. And we talk about partnerships and that kind of a thing. Certainly can go out to other platforms or other vendors and bring that in. So when we talk about vendor lock versus partnerships, business partnerships, it's how do you look at the overall offering that you're working with from a partnering point of view. So as an example, for CSG, we know CX is a huge area that is important to our customers. So our ability to bring those elements into play and have it as a quick extension that's a cost effective and fast time to market is also important.
So before we jump into questions from our attendees and registrants here, let's just wrap up with saying, we still have the urgency today, right? So in year one, what decisions are people going to be making that might break their business by year two? What should people be thinking about now to really set themselves up for this forward-looking approach?
Yeah, Jeff, do you want to take a pass?
Yeah, agile infrastructure is super key to winning in this marketplace, and having the data-driven infrastructure to continue to make those incremental changes and adjustments as your business grows, right? There's a lot of complexity in these rollouts, and it's deeper and more expansive than just the network build. That's super important, but a quick follow is going to be the software infrastructure behind it. There's going to be issues with regulatory compliances and all kinds of things around customer experience engagement in the marketplace, right? Maximizing your efficiencies to be able to move quickly and have some urgency in your business model will be really the most successful play.
David, I would add to that as well. We have customers that we've been working with for a number of years that are coming through this maybe from a network technology shift from traditional coax cable offerings over to fiber as an offering. The ability to be adaptable to that and know that you have the ability not only on the infrastructure side, but also from an offering point of view to quickly pivot towards new offerings in market and not have to say, well, do I have to stand up additional backend systems, additional elements for a new line of business, or do I need to shift from I do HSD plus linear TV today, I'm going to roll out fiber and say fiber plus streaming is the way you need to go. And the customers say, I like the fiber part, but I want to keep my linear TV. The ability to adapt to those things quickly and not be wrestling with or struggling with the back end systems, how that all interoperates. That's another thing to keep in mind here. The more back end bespoke connection points you're introducing, really, it introduces points of risk if those elements are going to be something that you have to think through on new offering rollout, or you're adapting offerings, maybe to be a combination of traditional systems or offerings with fiber. Those are all elements that you should be thinking about now.
Great. So jumping into some of the registrant questions
Sure.
and attendee questions here. I think you've already answered this, but this would be good to expand on, which is, do you feel there's enough focus on monetization versus network build?
I think in my view, it comes down to you're juggling a lot of stuff today as an operator. There are so many things we're working through. Obviously, you're thinking about monetization. It's a case of how quickly can you turn that into a order to cash effective way to deliver service. mean, no one's doing this to be, charitable on bringing network. We all want connectivity. It's important. Monetization is almost a given. The real risk or the real challenge is how quickly can you monetize? And I brought up the scenario before of that buyer's remorse. Maybe you decide you're going to sign up for service and you're waiting for something to get installed, and you have that second thought to say, no, I'm going to cancel the order before it's actually completed. There's a lot of risk with that. So you've got to be thinking about it. When we talk about ROI, if I go back to that as kind of the lead into this entire webinar, how you turn that ROI model into a combination of customer experience and then shortening the order to cash cycle, those are the things that are really going to help you grow and monetize faster. So I think everybody's thinking about it, David. It's a matter of kind of the mechanics that you're using to make that happen. Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we're here to create some urgency for everybody on this. Clearly from the polls, two things came out, right? One was we're all focused on the network. So that says, no, we're not focused on the software side as much. And we're here to advocate that should be happening in parallel, right? What's that business plan along with the network build out of what it's going to look like when we turn the lights on and get going here. The second poll showed that we're evenly split around what we think the issues are with delivering that service, right? What that says is, where's your priority? Maybe they should be equal priority. Maybe there should be priority, but clearly there's a need for having conversation and a plan around how we're going to roll this out and get going after the network is built out. So no, it needs to have more attention. And we're hoping today that's highlighting that with many of you on the call today.
So I thought we'd get through one without discussing AI yet, but we of course get the question about AI. Well, especially as we're looking at Bead funding, AI is also top of mind. So somebody's asking, how is AI utilized in the ESG suite to enable urgency and enhance the customer experience?
Yeah, great question. So we have a few things that we look at. So CSG as an offering, we handle the billing care and installation side of the house, so to speak, from an operations point of view. So we are looking at a few things. We're looking at predictive recommendations on offerings. So that what I would say best of fit for right sizing the offerings at the time the sale is happening. So think about that as a new customer acquisition, looking at how behaviorally customer would be using the service and making sure that that the offer is there to best fit it, which helps in terms of retention. We also look at things like payment and churn management. So predictive views on, is a customer going to run into a situation where they're maybe not paying, predicting that they may be getting to a payment situation where they're falling behind, those types of things. And also really kind of patterning that. So from an AI point of view, where we're building models and actually helping our customers facilitate that through flexible payment type of options, et cetera. And the last one I'll bring up, and it's probably more the first thing to think about, is optimization on installations. We know that installations and field management is a very costly part of the business. You have trucks, you have resources, you have time that all are important to that. So how do you optimize and make best use of those resources? It could be route optimization, it could be skill set optimization, how that all fits into doing that and learning from how those things are happening at the time that you're doing the installations, and then folding that back into, again, scheduling and then actual dispatch of those resources. Those are the primary areas that we're looking at. David, you're absolutely right. AI is a part of all of this. So we're absolutely infusing it into what we do from the business point of view. Jeff, did you?
Well, maybe I can help break it down to a simple business case, right? Text to pay using artificial intelligence, right? So as a customer, seeing my bill for the month and comparing it to last month, and the AI tool says, Jeff, this is how you worked last month with our products and services. This is what you're doing this month, and here's the difference. Here's an option to pay if you're good with this. If you'd like more questions, here's another portal to engage with us to talk further in more detail. That's all AI generated behind the scenes now and available in the marketplace today. Excellent.
So, again, somebody else is asking, just looking forward here, what does great post-install engagement look like? and what happens when it's ignored? So that's a loaded question.
Yeah,
but what does a great experience look like for people calling in?
So it starts at the moment that you're actually arriving for the installation. It's a case of, do you represent brand, and is it a case where you have the right skill set doing the installation, and are they enabled to do things like, I brought up the scenario where you may have smart devices in the home that may or may not be connected immediately. So how do you look at that? Are there ways to do things like upsells on extenders in home? So to be able to upsell those elements absolutely is part and parcel of that. The other aspect is what happens after you have a subscriber that's using the service. Ease of use on self-care, ease of use on communication back to the customer on elements that might be, if it's an outage, if it's additional follow-ups that might happen. From a customer lifecycle perspective, we think about customer journeys in a lot of ways of, do you have a solid way to have best use at the time that you're interacting with the customer on what they're going to, you talked about AI predicting what might be happening and they might be facing. So it's ease of use, it's that customer experience to make it as self-service as possible. And then the last thing I would say here would be, if you're going to have a call in to talk to the operator, you better be able to get a hold of them. And that ability to talk to a live person, that soft handoff, warm handoff from the point of maybe you're having some issue from a self-care perspective to actually talk to somebody, that's all part of it. And I'll go back to that idea of, when you break trust, when you have an issue with that, it's very hard to win it back. So Jeff, what are your thoughts there?
Well, look, a great post-install is, do you have a happy customer, right? And can you get that feedback immediately upon, installing and serving up that customer, right? Ask there, what's your communication strategy and engagement strategy with your customers? That's equally important as network, building out the infrastructure. Now my communication with my customer, am I providing good service and products to them? And how do I know that? Are they talking to me? Are they giving me feedback? Am I getting feedback from them? And am I pivoting based on that information? Those tools and processes should be in place to help you bring those insights to keep pivoting your business.
Yeah, just to add to that, Jeff, I love that thought. We've been talking about ROI over the last 45 minutes, David. That's a good ROI indicator, is customer satisfaction. Net promoter score is a kind of a loaded term, but you have a good indicator if satisfaction is up from just the way your customers are interacting with the brand. So back to what we said earlier, the brand itself, the experience you have, is as important as the product or the service that you provide.
Yeah, my example recently was, I had my provider come out and do a job for me, and at the end they asked for a quick survey. They asked face to face, did I answer your questions? Did I address what you needed? Was everything satisfactory? Would you mind just helping me sign off on here that I completed the project? Great feedback right on the spot, and it helps an organization pivot from there, taking that data.
Yep, absolutely. And, certainly speaking from, you mentioned this earlier too, just, that interaction with the field person who's actually installing that service goes a long way towards that customer satisfaction. So that's a good time to get that information, that feedback. So I've got another one for you here. That's a bit of a loaded question, but it's a good one. Somebody would like to know, what's one thing that operators should stop doing and one thing that they should start?
Yeah. Jeff, do you want to take a pass at that one?
Well, the one thing you should start doing is, we mentioned earlier, hundreds and thousands of competitors. What is your niche? Find it and get really good at it. Organizations can do 2 things, 3 things really well, not 20 things. So get really good at it and provide a frictionless customer experience, and find the infrastructure and tools to help you do that. Start doing that, and you're going to be one of those companies that's going to be here 5+ years out.
Yeah, as far as so he's going to give me the harder one, which is what he And I think just going back to the poll question, when you see a number of things, the second poll question is there's a lot of things happening. I think it's stop trying to maybe do everything and focus on the moments that matters, and really how do you tie together. Again, you're making a big investment on the network side, keeping things straightforward, simple in terms of customer experience. You spend a lot of time on loving the conversation around customer experience. Stop maybe overworking what you have as far as all of these different piece parts that are there, and simplify as best you can down to those moments that matter, and being in a position where you know you're in a position to grow. So you can get yourself overloaded with a lot of, again, vendor decisions, technical decisions. The more you can simplify that, the better off you're going to be.
Great. Well, that actually wraps up the questions that we have for this call here. But before we wrap up the webinar, I just want to hand it back over to you to close us out.
Yeah.
Any parting words here?
Thank you for the time, and thanks FBA for the opportunity for us to have a conversation here. We're very much interested in the feedback here. It was great to get the feedback from the poll questions and the follow-on questions. Look, we've been in the market for several decades, going back to the late 80s, early 90s, and even when that first wave of cable build out happened, and a lot of lessons learned for us in that process. So we know we're on a journey here from a market point of view. Fiber feels a lot like what it did 25, 30 years ago when cable was really, and broadband was really kind of emerging. So a lot of exciting things happening. Really excited to be part of the journey here as well, and looking forward to working with FBA as we go forward here, and also with our customers. So Jeff, what are your closing?
Yeah, no, thank you everyone for your time today. We talked about a lot of topics, but if I could leave you with three things, it's find the infrastructure and software to help support that network build out. Find a good partner that's a thought leader and can execute with urgency, not necessarily fast, and allow us in this space to help you build the brand, build that loyalty, find that operational excellence, and provide that frictionless customer experience. Appreciate your time today. Thank you.